You know, when you think of Shakespeare, what comes to mind? Probably one guy, right? A solitary genius penning these masterpieces. But the real story, well, it's a bit different. Turns out he had a secret weapon, an entire team that took his words and turned them into absolute legends.
So let me ask you something. Who first brought Hamlet to the stage? Or Macbeth? Or King Lear? I mean, who were the actors that first spoke those iconic lines, to be or not to be? Who first had to figure out how to stage King Lear raging into a storm?
Well, the answer isn't just one man. It wasn't just Shakespeare. The real engine behind the genius was an entire company.
And that's the story we're diving into today. It's the story of these incredible artists, but also these brilliant entrepreneurs, and honestly, survivors. These were the people who didn't just perform Shakespeare's plays. They're the reason we have this legendary idea of Shakespeare in the first place.
All right, so their story really kicks into high gear with, well, a huge promotion. The year is 1603, and everything is about to change for this acting troupe because there's a new king in town. So, before 1603, they were called the Lord Chamberlain's men. And they were already the top dogs in London, the best acting troupe around under Queen Elizabeth I. But then King James I comes along, and he doesn't just, give them his approval. He basically adopts them. They get a royal patent, a complete rebrand, and from that moment on, they are known as the King's Men.
And this was way more than just a fancy new name. This royal seal of approval came with some serious perks. Key members, including Shakespeare himself, were made grooms of the chamber. That's an official position in the royal household. They were performing at court all the time. Get this, 187 times in just 13 years. The money got a lot better too. King James paid them almost double what Queen Elizabeth had. Of course, their workload at court doubled right along with it. They were now the official entertainment for the king.
So, with all this new status and, let's be honest, all this new cash, they were able to pull off one of the smartest business moves in theater history. This is how they completely cornered the market in London.
Okay, so here's their genius move. They ran a tale of two theaters. First, you've got the one everyone knows, the Globe. It was this huge open-air amphitheater. It could pack in something like 3,000 people from, well, every walk of life. Think of it as their big summer blockbuster venue. But then they also had the Blackfriars Theater. This was totally different. It was indoor, way more intimate and exclusive for a much wealthier crowd. And because it was indoors, they could put on shows all year long, even in the miserable London winter. No more seasonal layoffs.
And here's where the business genius really shines. A single ticket to the Blackfriars, the cheapest one you could get, was 6 pence. That's 6 times more than the 1-penny ticket to stand in the yard at the Globe. In fact, get this, the cheapest seat at the fancy Blackfriars cost the same as the most expensive seat at the Globe. So with this two-theater model, they were capturing everybody, the groundlings and the gentry. It made them rock solid financially.
But all that success and all that money was about to be put to the ultimate test, because the company was heading straight into a decade of just absolute disaster. A series of events that threatened to tear down everything they had worked so hard to build.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It is one punch after another. It starts in 1608. A huge plague outbreak closes all the theaters. Then, just a few years later, in 1613, their iconic home, the Globe Theater itself, burns right to the ground. Then, in 1616, the unimaginable happens. William Shakespeare dies. And as if that wasn't enough, just 3 years after that, their superstar actor, Richard Burbage, dies too. The theater, the writer, the star, all gone in the span of about a decade.
And at Fire at the Globe, it was the definition of dramatic. It happened during the performance of Henry VIII. They fired a stage cannon for a special effect, and a spark landed on the thatched roof. And poof, the whole place went up in flames. It burned down in about an hour. Amazingly, nobody died, but just like that, their legendary home was nothing but a pile of ash.
And then, the loss that must have felt like the end of the world. In 1616, Shakespeare is gone. I mean, this is the man who wrote all their greatest hits. He wasn't just their writer. He was a shareholder, a partner, the very soul of the company. You have to ask, how in the world do you recover from that?
And before they could even catch their breath, another pillar of the company just crumbled. Richard Burbage. This guy was their leading man, the actor who originated the roles of Hamlet, King Lear, Othello. I mean,
He was those characters for the very first audiences. He was so beloved that his death was treated like a national tragedy. This quote from the Earl of Pembroke says it all. He said he just couldn't bear to see a play so soon after losing Burbage. The grief was just too much.
So let's recap. Their theater is a pile of ash. Their genius playwright is dead. Their superstar actor is dead. I mean, for any other company, that would be game over, right? They would have just folded. But not the Kingsmen. They didn't just survive this. They evolved.
What they did was actually pretty remarkable. They had a succession plan ready to go. A playwright named John Fletcher, who was already super talented, stepped up to become the new lead writer. They brought in an actor named Joseph Taylor to take on Burbage's massive roles. But they did something even smarter. They didn't try to replace Shakespeare. Instead, they decided to create and cultivate a Shakespearean style. They made sure that even the new plays still had that classic Kingsmen feel. It was all about preserving the brand.
And this, right here, might be their most important contribution to, well, to all of literature. The Kingsmen became the first company to ever revive old plays. They kept Shakespeare's work alive. They brought his plays back, they tweaked them for new audiences, and crucially, in 1623, two of the company's veterans gathered all his plays together and published them in what we now call the First Folio. Let's be clear, without these guys, a huge chunk of Shakespeare's work could have just vanished forever.
So for nearly 40 years, the Kingsmen were the undisputed kings of the London stage. They survived plague, fire, the death of their founders, but the thing that finally brought them down wasn't a disaster, it was politics.
Basically, the English Civil War breaks out, and the whole political landscape just gets turned upside down. The Puritans, who, to put it mildly, were not big fans of the theater, they saw it as sinful, a den of vice, they gained control of London and Parliament. And one of the very first things on their to-do list, shut down the playhouses.
And with an active parliament, just like that, it was over. On September 2nd, 1642, every single theater in England was ordered closed. The King's Men, this incredible institution, were forced to disband. Those stages where Hamlet and Macbeth first came to life, they just went silent. And they stayed that way for 18 long years.
It is such a sudden, powerful end to an amazing story, and it really leaves you with a question that's just as relevant today as it was back then, What actually happens to a culture, to a whole society, when its stages go dark and its artists are silenced?